Hello, beautiful. I'm your host, Nicole Goff. Welcome to the Ecstatic Life podcast, the podcast for women who want it all: health, wealth, freedom, authenticity, love, beauty, all of the hidden gems just waiting to be uncovered. This is the podcast for women who are ready to discover their inner creatrix, to discover their inner manifester, and who want to find the ecstatic in every day. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Ecstatic Life podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Goff, and today we are here with my good friend, Shellbe Cucuel. And Shellbe is a holistic life coach. She is an essential oil enthusiast. She is a stay-at-home single mom, and she is co-host of the Fearless Motherhood podcast, which I have had the pleasure of being on 2 times now.
Yeah.
Welcome, Shellbe.
Hi. Thank you for having me on. That was a nice intro. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's funny to be in the opposite seats now, huh?
I know. I don't know what to do here. Welcome, Nicole. Oh, wait. Welcome me. Yeah,
be my
this
guest.
is great. Yes. Okay. What can I do for you today? What do you want to talk about?
Well, today we want to talk about the subject of extended breastfeeding. So I have done what would be considered extended breastfeeding with all of my 5 children. And Shellbe is in a very unique situation of having gone way above and beyond everybody else almost in the U.S. and has extended her breastfeeding to 5 years now. So we're here to talk about normalizing extended breastfeeding. What is actually extended breastfeeding? And we're going to have a really deep dive on this conversation, and it's going to be lots of fun. So, Shellbe, I would like to start off by hearing some of your backstory, your journey into motherhood, what you thought about breastfeeding before becoming a mother, your normalization of extended breastfeeding before this journey. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I thought about this last night because we had kind of discussed what I thought about it before I became a mom. And so I was thinking last night in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. Oh, because I was breastfeeding. Because that's how she sleeps, because I'm a pacifier. That's why I was awake. That's right. And I remember, so I didn't become a mom until I was 38. And I remember all my life, I just loved children so much. And I always had this innate reaction to, like, I would just, if a baby was crying, I would just pick it up and be like, oh my God. I would, like, for instance, if I found like an abandoned baby, I would just stick it to the boob. Like, no doubt about it, 100% before I became a mom. And I remember specifically this memory came to me last night. I was in a gas station in the middle of Florida somewhere out in the boondocks. And this girl walks in, and she was probably 20, clearly a drug addict. Oh, it was heartbreaking. And she had this tiny baby. It was I found out it was 3 days old. And she's walking around the store, and the baby's head is just hanging off of her elbow. And so she's not supporting the baby's head at all. And she's walking around like, like, where the hell is this? And I'm looking for this and blah, blah. And I was like, it was all I could do to not just take that baby. I didn't want to take it from her, but I wanted to rescue the baby. And it was so overwhelming that I was in tears. I got in the car, and I was probably 32 at the time. I got in the car with my partner at the time, and I just told her, like, I want to go rescue that baby. Like, clearly that mom can't do this. Like, she's not in a space to do this. And I just imagined, like, I would grab that baby and I would stick it on the boob. And so then I actually Googled in the car that day if you can create breast milk, like, when it not giving birth. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's actually a thing. So for just a second, I got this weird obsession with, like, oh my gosh, I could actually rescue and, have a baby and actually breastfeed. So with that being said, I have always just felt like that was such a natural thing to do. And whenever moms told me that they didn't because it was weird or their boobs were made for their husbands, it's such a straight, and no judgment. It's just a strange thing to me that you wouldn't pick up the baby and go right there. It just seems like the thing to do. The baby's crying, that's where they go. So it was a no-brainer for me. So fast forward to when I was 38, I became a mom, and I had a little girl. And our breastfeeding journey was really good, really, really good. I attribute a lot of that to the fact that she was 41 weeks gestation. So I think she has a big mouth. She had big lips. She was very mature. I swear I gave birth to a toddler. I was like, whoa. I don't know what I expected to come out, but like my nieces were really tiny when they were born. So when she came out, I was just like, oh, you're like full grown at 9 pounds, I think. But we had a good experience, and I experienced postpartum depression, and I had read a lot, and I had a great lactation specialist and midwife, and we had talked about the oxytocin release from breastfeeding. So there were a lot of times when I felt almost like I selfishly nursed because I was just sad, and I was like, just come here. Like, I need you here with me cuddling, and I knew that that was good for me. So, and obviously
that was good for her also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I've always been nurse on demand. It's just like boobs hanging out all the time. And then while I was pregnant, I guess that's kind of when Instagram kind of came around. I don't know. And I followed a lot of pages of normalized breastfeeding. And I was like, yeah, why is this taboo? Like, I'm not going to cover myself. It was just a no-brainer. I'm like, I'm not going to cover myself. So I made it a point. When my baby was crying, my boob was coming out. And it didn't matter to me because it was about her and I. I think the first time we went out, she was like 6 weeks old, maybe. And I was down, we went to this dolphin research center down in the Keys. And I was sitting at the picnic table with my sister and best friend. So they both had toddlers at this time. And I was still very postpartum. I was still bleeding. I was still in a lot of pain. And I was just, my back hurt, all the things. And so I just like whipped a boob out and set her on the table, and I was nursing her. And my sister, who's also really into breastfeeding, she said, oh, wow, you're just throwing it right out there, huh? And I said, you know what? Yes, I am. And I was like, if anyone around me has a problem with it, I was like, had this like mama bear, like, somebody say something, please. Come tell me this makes you uncomfortable, because right now my uterus is gushing blood. Blah, 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 blah. I can go in more detail of that, but I don't need to. So that was kind of my thing. Like, I'm sorry, does this make you uncomfortable? Because it isn't about you. No one ever did, unfortunately. No one ever said anything about my breastfeeding.
I had the same experience.
Yeah.
I have a very similar story with my first. It was 2 months the first time I went out, and it was to the mall.
Yeah.
Of all places, because it was Christmas time.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to navigate this whole situation. There's this little breastfeeding closet in the Oaks Mall. And I'm like way across. I'm like in the back of Dillard's. And I'm like, what do I do? She's hungry now, and I can't make it to the little breastfeeding closet. And this little bell went off in my head that said, what the fuck are you doing? Just whip it out and feed her right here. And it was a battle of shame, because I was young when I had my first. I was 22. And, I had been breastfeeding. My mom extended breastfeeding for me until I was 3 or so. But I hadn't been around it since. And it was a no-brainer for me to breastfeed. But that was the first experience of being on display. And I remember I was in the men's section of Dillard's, too, because we were buying a present for a man in my life. And I sat down on the bench, and I whipped it out. And it was so life-changing for me, and it really made me grow. And I became a very, a lactivist. So at that time...
I've never heard that word.
Yeah. Lactivist, lactation activist. I had the breastfeeding is normal stickers, and I was very somebody say something. I'd go out into restaurants, and I'm like, I got my boob. Like, I can legally have both of my titties out.
Right.
Breastfeeding
Right.
in Florida, you can legally have both nipples showing. So I'm like, say something. Not that I was being overly provocative, but I had my whole script in my head, ready to go. Like, if somebody says something to me, I'm going to point out all of these benefits. And nobody ever said anything except my stuff. I did have people come up, and they're like, oh, that's so beautiful that you're breastfeeding. And, oh, you're so brave for breastfeeding in public. Nobody ever said anything to me in public, which I was kind of like, damn.
I know. I felt the same way. I'm like, does anybody? No, nobody cares. Okay. Well, good. Yeah, I was totally ready. Again, I had like joined a couple of groups where it was like, and for the listeners who aren't watching this, every time we say extended, we're putting quotations on this, okay? Because that's another part of what we're going to talk about is what is extended. So, yeah. Well, so we went from, well, I want to talk about the emotional side of it first because I was talking about how I would quote unquote use nursing or use her to soothe my sadness. So then she was about to have her third birthday. And I thought, okay, I need to emotionally prepare myself for her to wean, baby. So I need to emotionally prepare myself. So her birthday comes up and like, I remember she had her big pink tutu on her birthday at her birthday party and she's nursing. And I actually told my sister, will you take a picture of me? Because I was like, this could be it, this could be it. And then like, I randomly take pictures. Like one day I'm going to have a whole album of her nursing from like beginning to end. And you're shaking the table. And so she's right here next to me because we're talking about nursing. So she's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I love that.
Can I get in on this?
Yeah. Like I heard my word. So randomly, I'll take pictures because it's just so sweet. I just love it. I love the bond. And so then 4 came along and I was like, okay, like I emotionally am okay with this. Like I need to make sure that I'm letting go of it because I know she's my only child. I know this is my only experience. And my dad had actually brought up to me, like, make sure that you aren't doing this for you. Like because I want to keep my baby a baby, So I put a lot of thought into that. And I read a book, Breastfeeding Your Toddler. I have gone way past where she goes to. She goes to 3, I think, in that book. So we're past that. But it made me feel confident about one of the stigmas is, oh, you're going to have a titty baby, quote unquote. Well, I found with this, I kind of go to like when she was about 18 months old, she will go to a playground, for instance, and she feels nervous to go out and play. She nurses. As she's nursing, she's looking around, and then she pops up and runs out. And then if she feels a little uncomfortable, she comes back. And that was the scenario that was in this book about like when they feel secure at home with you, they feel more courage to go out into the world and more independence. So I always felt comfortable with that. But I wanted to make sure it wasn't about me. So 4 rolls around and I was like, okay, all right, anytime. And then we just had her 5th birthday. And she keeps telling everyone she's going to nurse until she's 12, which I know isn't going to happen. Oh, excuse me. She said 13. She's right here editing.
13.
Yeah. So, so I know that that's not going to happen. I wanted to come talk to you about this today because for the first time in my breastfeeding journey, I'm kind of feeling like alone in this because I'm getting a little bit of pushback for the first time. And my answer is because I'm not ready to stop, because she's not ready to stop. And that's all I got for you, So to have a conversation about this, it feels good. And you introduced me to that podcast, Badass Breastfeeding. And that was great to hear another mom talk about nursing until her son was 6.5. So for the first time, it's just been like, hey, I feel like I could use a little conversation here.
Well, so while we're on the subject of pushback, that was one of the things that I had wanted to ask you about. So you're saying you're just now getting pushback, but in general, there is an idea that when you breastfeed into toddlerhood and beyond, that there's weirdness about that. And so I will tell you a personal story that I have had. And I was breastfeeding my 4th, and she was 18 months at the time. So a small toddler, not a big kid. And I was in public at an art show, and a coworker's husband became very uncomfortable about my public breastfeeding. And I guess he went home with his wife and they had a conversation. And I get an email, this long email the next day, where she's telling me how I shouldn't be sexualizing men around me. I shouldn't be making them have uncomfortable feelings about me
Ew.
nursing my little girl. Yeah. And it was this whole long email. And, I responded back that that was his problem, not my
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
That there was nothing sexual about what I was doing. And if he was having uncomfortable feelings, that he's the one that needed help and he's the one that needed to change. And
Yeah.
I did have a chance in that situation to do my whole long list that I had had in my head for all those years if somebody had said something. But I put it all out on, paper, digital paper. And I emailed it back to her. But so this idea that there's something weird or unnatural is pervasive in the West. And again, you
Yes.
touched on this in the beginning. It's kind of like people have this idea that breasts are meant for men.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in the West, we have a very upside down view of female bodies and their functions. And it's, these things that are taboo that should not be. It's not the same in other countries. From what we've learned recently from the Badass Breastfeeder podcast, that in most countries, 5 is a normal age to wean.
Mm-hmm.
So what we call extended breastfeeding, again in quotations here, which is anything over a year, is absolutely not the norm in other places. Right. And our ideas here in the U.S. about when and where and how people should nurse their babies is just very backwards in my opinion. So do you want to touch on your feelings about any of that? Any of your experiences?
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to go into this conversation with you. Like I had done a little bit of Googling, which was interesting. There wasn't much information. It was all like 3 was the end of the breastfeeding journey as far as extended goes. So I wanted to I'm going to come with all these facts about the countries that breastfeed the longest and everything. And I have a little bit, but this isn't about you should breastfeed your kid until they want to stop. You should breastfeed until they're 7. No, you shouldn't. If you're you should give it a really good try, and you should get a lot of support, and you should give it a lot of effort, and you should really, especially in the very beginning, yes, it's very, very, very important. And I think there's a lack of support, lactation specialists, in the hospitals. So if you do have a hospital birth, you may not be getting that. I was very fortunate to have a great lactation specialist. But you can seek that out. And actually, you can contact either Nicole or myself through Fearless Motherhood to recommend someone in your area. We will help you find someone to give you that support. But going back to the extended part, this is just if you feel like you still want to do it, I want you to feel empowered and comfortable to do it. That's my thing. Because when I say I'm getting pushback, it's like the 5-year-old at the playground. It's like, what is she doing? Why is she doing that? She's not a baby. So it's making sure that she feels good about it. And then, 1 or 2 people, like my 85-year-old grandmother, bless her, she's like, I think it's about time to be done, but in her day was when formula was introduced, so she doesn't understand. And I just go, I know, Grandma, well, whenever she's done, we're done. But, across the globe, the average weaning age for humans are 2.5 to 7 years old. And I think, now that I'm digging into this a little more, I think there are a lot more breastfeeding moms at this age. They're just not talking about it because they're a little bit shy or ashamed. So I want to normalize it more. And as far as sexualizing it, I really think that we are breast obsessed in this country, because to me, the thought, breasts are sexual, but also there's milk in them right now. How, they're doing something right now, dude. So if that's your fetish or something, maybe that's the thing. Maybe this guy had a fetish with you, I don't know. But that's,
I don't want to think about it too hard.
Right. They're making it weird is my point. Like
Yes.
this I don't know if it's an organ, but it's doing a function. Like my body's naturally making this happen. So it's not some weird thing that I'm doing. So, and the other part of it is the benefits to the mom. Like I don't know how much you know about that or our listeners know about that, but it reduces the risk of breast cancer, and ovarian cancer, and osteoporosis, and on my notes here, rheumatoid arthritis, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and insulin requirements in diabetic women. So if you're feeling like, one of the things I hear a lot is, well, I feel depleted, like this is wearing me out. Okay, well, let's also get some support on that note, and then also know that that's actually helping you. And I read somewhere, I couldn't find it for this, but I read somewhere that breastfeeding is accumulative. So the longer you breastfeed, the better your chances, or the better your, like, the guards go up.
Yeah.
One second.
I figure there's like 0% chance that I can get breast cancer because I have
agree.
breastfed for a total of 14 and a half years at this point, I believe.
Wow.
So I'm like, there's got to be like negative chance that I can get breast cancer at this point.
Right. That's what I mean. It's accumulative. So it builds up and builds up the longer you breastfeed.
So another benefit for mom is actually in menopause and with your period. So I experienced a very, very extended lactation amenorrhea, which is the lack of a period due to lactating. So with each of my 5 kids, it was a year to a year and a half. About 18 months is when typically I would get my periods back. And it is actually unnatural for a woman to have as many periods as we do in the West. It's actually unhealthy. It makes you have a worse menopause. And so our bodies are meant to spend more time in lactation amenorrhea. We're meant to spend more time pregnant. We're meant to start our periods later. So we start our periods very early in the West. Even now, I hear kids as young as 7 and 8 is normal to start your period, which just is like, I know. But so we have a lot more periods, and that is actually really taxing to our bodies. And so the longer you extend breastfeeding, it actually is a buffer for your menopause also. It actually helps with that.
Good,
so another benefit.
I'm perimenopausal right now. Just
yeah,
roll right into that.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I only went 6 months with no period after I had her. I was disappointed.
Yeah, and
I was like, I thought I got a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, some people go right back to it. I mean, my daughter Ari, I think 3 months is when she got hers back, and I've known people, within a month or so, which, unfortunate for them. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I don't know what causes that to happen versus, if you're exclusively breastfeeding, like Ari was exclusively breastfeeding. My best friend Mandy, she was exclusively breastfeeding. So
me too.
It wasn't like, so I don't know what causes that, but I got lucky. I had a lot of years without periods. It was so weird because I was back to back pregnant and nursing for so many years that it was kind of weird the times when I would get my period back.
I bet.
Be like, oh yeah, that uncomfortable, inconvenient thing again. But yes, I'm back having a cycle. I'm a cycling person again, but for like 10 years, I had maybe a half dozen cycles.
Wow.
Just pregnant, breastfeeding, pregnant, breastfeeding.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I had one where I had one cycle between getting pregnant again. So, in like 18 months plus, but 9 months of being pregnant on each side. So it was like one cycle, and like, what was that, like 4+ years?
Oh my gosh. This is why we had you on the Fearless Motherhood podcast, because not only do you have 5 children, you are also doing a podcast and doing a blog and doing all these other amazing things, doula, and homeschooling. So like, yeah, the list goes on. Wow. And here I am with one kid, and I'm like, honey, can you go in the other room while mommy does a podcast? No? Okay. Here you are.
So, it might actually be harder for you because of that, though. Like, I found the more you have, the more they like entertain each other. True. So like right now, I literally have no grown-up help in the house. Right now, I have my 10-year-old babysitting the other 3 for $14. So.
Oh, all right. Go, mama.
To the 10-year-old, $14 is like, whoa.
Yeah. And you're totally right, because she's bored. That's what's going on right now. She's bored.
Yeah.
And that's it. And if my nieces were here, she would be totally fine. Like yesterday I had a podcast recording. She was with my nieces. Totally fine all day long. Didn't even want me to pick her up when I went over to my sister's. So, yeah, it's just, you're right.
It's so different with the one as a single mom, because I was in that boat for 8 years. You know, Ari was 8 when her first sibling was born. And so I was a single mom up until she was 6. And so I feel, it's a whole different game. And you have a whole slew of them. You just kind of like let the chaos happen, and you're like, you guys just take care. Don't kill yourselves. Just go take care of your siblings.
Yeah, right. Just nobody die.
Yeah, you just become much more like, the house didn't burn down. We're all good.
Right. Exactly. Well, it's like, it's all I've ever known. With her being a single mom. Her dad is very much in the picture, by the way. I just have to say that. I don't want it to sound like he's not. I got to give him some credit. But it's always just been the two of us. So that's another part of the breastfeeding journey I think I'd like to touch on. That term touched out. You know, I don't have a partner. So her and I she's my cuddle. She's my cuddles, you know? And at night when she wakes up in the night, it's just her and I. So I don't have another person that, and I'm sorry if this sounds derogatory, but like, I don't have another person that needs my body, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, just throwing that out there. So I think that has
for
a lot
any
to do with
listeners out there.
Yeah. well, not
sorry.
any listeners. No. Hey, you know, I think I am going to find my soulmate through the podcasting world. But anyways, so that is another thing that I think is important, because when I talk to my friends and my sister and my best friend that maybe are ready to be done, that's a part of it where it's like, you know, because they say like, okay, so I get the baby down or the toddler or the kid. And then here comes the hubby. Okay, it's my time. I love you. I want you. And it's like, I just don't want to be touched. And I only have one kid, so I can only imagine with 5, because your 10-year-old is still touching you, right? She still needs you. She still needs things. So I think that's an important thing to touch on. Touch. I just said touch, and I thought that was funny. But
well, there's a term for that. I just learned that. Do you remember what it was for being touched out? There was in that podcast, the Badass Breastfeeder. I wish I had made a note on it. There's a technical term for it. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's like a phobia you get. And I have experienced that. So Ari, I weaned her at 3.5. And so you get this, like, it makes you want to like throw your kid across the room. It's a very visceral, like, don't touch me. And it's kind of like, for me anyways, psychologically damaging, because you're like, this baby that I've loved and just enjoyed all the cuddles, and then all of a sudden this thing comes over you where you're just like, oh, every time they try to nurse. And I experienced that twice. I experienced that with my first and with my second. And with my second, it was during pregnancy. So I breastfed her till 3.5. I breastfed all through my pregnancy with my middle, my third, and tandem nursed for a year. And while pregnant, I had to try so hard, because I think she was 1.5 when I got pregnant. So she was definitely still in my window of needing. For me personally, I feel like a 1.5-year-old needs breast milk, needs that
Mm-hmm.
connection, needs that nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in the thick of it still, and I had to fight that urge, especially when she started doing the thing where they like twiddle the other
Oh,
nipple. Like
I was
I
gonna
just,
mention that.
I had the creeps. The creeps would come over me. I would just get the heebie-jeebies, and I'd have to do everything I can not to just like push her off of me. Get away! So it's a real thing. It's
It is.
intense. But you know that in that time I worked through it. It all worked out. It was beautiful to tandem nurse. Her and her sister would hold hands while they
Oh
nurse. Like I'd have one on
gosh.
one side and one on the other. They'd hold hands and look at each other in the eyes like they were just so in love with each other. It was the sweetest thing. I've got pictures of it. I love looking back at those.
Oh my gosh.
Until the little one turned 1
Mm-hmm.
and then started fighting. So they would start hitting each other in the face instead of holding
Oh my
hands.
gosh.
Mine, mine, mine. And then I was like, okay, 3.5-year-old, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
the baby still needs it. We got to be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't have you fighting over the titties. So,
Right?
but yeah, I wouldn't have given up that experience for anything. It was so sweet. Yeah.
I would recommend this was my experience with that. So first of all, the twiddling. I'm glad you brought that up. What the fuck? Okay. So when
They
she
all
was
do it.
when she was really tiny, like she was never a great sleeper. So anything that she wanted to do while she was going to sleep, I was like, I don't care. And it was like at first it was cute. You know, her little like 3-month-old hand was there. It's like, oh, that's so cute and sweet. And here we are, cuddle, cuddle. Very maternal, as you can tell. And then she would like, if I tried to move her hand, she'd wake up. So then I was like, okay, well, and I remember one night she had her tiny little sharp baby nails like pinching on my other nipple. And I was like, okay, just don't move because just let her, she's going to fall asleep eventually. She's going to fall asleep eventually. And I was like, I think that I should stop this now. But I didn't. And I didn't stop night nursing. So still last night, 3 times, she was like, Mama Ninny. She calls it Ninny. Mama Ninny. Mama Ninny. And then she'd fall back asleep. As soon as I try to move, no, I need Ninny to sleep. So the twiddling is something now where she's old enough where I'm like, I can't do that. It's too much right now. So what I would recommend is to also look at what's going on around you when you have that feeling of like, I can't handle this anymore. So to new moms that are experiencing this. So for instance, if I'm nursing her and maybe having a cup of tea, so I have caffeine going on, and I'm having a conversation with my dad who talks as much as I talk. So he's talk, and she's twiddling and she's nursing. I'm going to explode. So what it is the overstimulation. And so then I get frustrated with her. I did until I realized what was going on. So I would be like, stop. And then I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. Like you said, I love this kid so much. And why am I getting frustrated with her? So it's not that. It's that I'm overstimulated from all the outside things. So I would remove myself from that situation and go, okay, we're going to go sit in the other room, or we're not going to nurse right now. Just give me a second. And I would just recognize what was actually going on. So yeah, the twiddling, I would recommend stop it because at 5, it's still like, it's a whole nother level. Have you, that was all I thought about that. Have you ever breastfed another person's child?
Yes. When you were doing your intro, I thought to bring that up. In fact, I have breastfed 2 other people's. So
Awesome.
I breastfed my nephew and I breastfed my grandson.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was babysitting for my sister-in-law and brother when my nephew was 4 months old, and there were a couple of times where he ran out of bottle milk, and so natural thing, baby's hungry.
Of course.
I breastfed him, and I babysat Ari's son, River, my grandson, when he was, I think, 6 months old. Wasn't too long ago. And she got home later than expected, and he would not take a bottle. And so I was like, well.
Yeah.
And, she was fine with that. We had talked about it ahead of time. So,
Yep. I had the honor of breastfeeding my niece, and I think she was about a year old. My sister had to have a procedure done, and so they recommended that she didn't nurse for 8 hours, and obviously she had to go have the procedure done. So I had the kids, and we had talked about it, and then she said, if you feel like, this was the first time she had been away from the baby, she actually had to be put under a little bit for this procedure, so it was a little scary. She was like, oh, I'm leaving my baby, I have to go do this. So we had talked about it, and she said, if you feel like she needs that, do it. And I was like, okay, all right. It was a little like, I mean, I felt totally fine with it, but she had left, and we were at a hotel, and the kids were playing and everything, and then she started to get, so she was about 1, and she started to get like, mommy, mommy, and I was like, come here. And I said, do you want Ninny? And I pulled it out. She latched right on, like it was nothing different at all. And I will tell you, because I'm normalizing weird stuff, right? That's my purpose in life right now, is normalizing weird shit. The latch was so incredibly different. That was what was weird. The latch. It was like very fluttery and different. And I was like, oh, this makes me feel a little bit weird. So I actually had to like look away from her for a second, because it was like this beautiful moment, but it was fluttery, and it was tickly, and it was different. And my daughter has a very big mouth and a very deep latch. She did not. My niece did not. So I was like, oh, this is okay. This is different. This is kind of strange. Never thought about that. I have since discussed that with other moms, and they are like, oh yeah, the latch is like, it's different, and it's a different sensation.
Well, having nursed 5 different children of my own, plus 2 others that weren't my own, I've experienced all the different latches.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had at least one with a tongue tie. I did not get it corrected, and that was very uncomfortable latching, for the first like 6 months. I just felt very against doing the procedure. I mean, I know it's supposed to be better for them, and it's real common now, but the idea of somebody putting a laser in my newborn's mouth just we don't do circumcision or any kind of stabbing with needles. Like, the skin barrier is really important to me, to like not break the skin barrier. And so I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I dealt with the pain and, the sore nipples and all of that. I just dealt with it. I figured it was better than subjecting my newborn to that.
When you think about actually going to the office to get it done, it's like, I could probably manage this a little bit longer. I could manage it a little bit longer, and the next thing you know, your nipple falls off. So
they never fell off. They're still there. But
everything's fine. But that was such a beautiful experience, and I have a very close relationship with both of my nieces, but I feel like we have a different bond. Like, it's just something special, and then she did it again. I think my sister had gone somewhere for a couple hours, and I felt like she could go to sleep, and I was like, let's try. And she nursed a little bit and fell asleep, and it was so beautiful. And now it's a joke. So she's 3 now, 3 in a couple months, and she's still nursing. But my sister's trying a little bit to like stop the daytime, like on demand thing. It's been taxing on her. And so, but she'll be like, I want Ninny. And I'm like, I got it. And she'll go, no, I don't want but it's a joke, I'll be like, come here. And she's like, no, Aunt Shellbe, I don't want your Ninny. And I'm like, hey, anybody?
I keep joking that on my nephew's 16th birthday, I'm going to tell the story about the time I breastfed him. That would be the time to do that, right?
Yeah. Well, especially for a boy. I think especially for a boy. I'd be like, oh, man. And I mean, one thing about the breastfeeding someone else, whenever people think that's strange, not that I think this is not strange, but what about in the slavery days when the slaves literally were what did they call them? Milk nurses?
Milkmaids.
Milkmaids. They were milkmaids.
Yeah, there was a job for hundreds of years, if not more. There was a job for aristocratic women to have someone nurse their babies for them. A wet nurse. That was the other. Yeah, a wet nurse. So you would hire someone, or if you had a slave, then you would not employ them and force them. But you had someone else, if you were an aristocratic woman, nurse your baby for you. Although I did have an experience. So when Ari was a baby, I left her with a good friend of mine, and I was gone. I was doing a cleaning job, and I was gone longer. And she nursed her. And when I got back, we hadn't talked about it ahead of time. She was 1. And I felt a little uncomfortable because I was like, oh, we didn't talk about that. Like, she just did it. And I was like, You know, and then when I thought about it, I'm like, I'm okay with it. But I wish we'd had a conversation, you know, because it was a little weird to like come back and be like, oh, by the way, I nursed your baby to sleep. And I'm like, but I was going longer than I said. So, and actually Ari nursed her brother one time when I asked her to babysit. Yeah. So me and my husband had a overnight date for the first time. Yeah. And it had been years and years since we had a night alone without children in bed with us. So I had Ari, this was recently, I had Ari babysit overnight, and JJ woke up in the middle of the night, and she nursed him back to sleep. So, you know, I told her if that happened, it was okay. So we breastfed each other.
And how did she feel about it?
They're getting real weird here.
You know, but if we go back to the tribal times, and we're all sitting around, I did a past life regression hypnotherapy, and I was a Native American, like, warrior woman, which is really cool to think of. So I picture that very, very vividly in my mind. So we're all like, there's the teepees, we're all around the fire, someone's hunting, someone's gathering, someone's doing all the things, right? And like, baby's crying. Why would just pick? I'm out there like chopping up trees or something. Can you just feed the baby? Like, it just seems so normal to me. It really does. I do think I understand the feeling that you had about like someone else nursing her before you had like talked about it, because it's a little bit like, oh, okay. It's this weird thing. I don't know how to put it into words, but I know exactly what you mean. But it just feels
almost like a jealousy, a slight jealousy. Like, oh, wait, that's our thing. You did the thing with the baby. That's my thing with the baby. Nobody else. But I got over it.
But that's
quickly.
exactly the emotion that I felt
initial
for
reaction.
You. I would be like jealous, which is weird, but I would feel the exact same way. So to me, it just seems like it. Here we go. This is to sum it up. Put all the other egos aside. The baby's crying. Okay. Put all the ego aside and all this other shit. The baby needs something. So who's going to pick the baby up and take care of it? We can talk about emotions later. We can talk about the feelings later, but let's take care of the baby. Like with your son. I mean, what was she supposed not that you disagree with her nursing, but like, what was she supposed to do? Just be like, no, that's weird. I'm just going to let you lay here and cry, or comfort him. I mean, it just seems like the natural thing to do. So I think that's beautiful. And thank you for sharing that, because I think that's beautiful. So we can normalize this a bit more.
To the point that you were saying earlier, she said it was so weird because he has a mouthful of teeth. You know, he's got all his toddler teeth in.
Oh,
and she was like, that was so weird. She's like, it didn't feel like emotionally uncomfortable or weird in that way. But she was like, the teeth.
Yeah.
Because Rivers just popped his first teeth recently. So she had never experienced, and it was a whole, the whole mouthful of teeth. So she said it was a little like scary.
That was, yes. And that's the thing.
That brings me to a point though.
Yes.
Actually, to pivot off of that. That's another thing that people say about extended breastfeeding. They're like, oh, well, what do you do when they get all those teeth? And it's like, I've never had a toddler bite my nipple. The only time I've been bit is when they're little tiny babies and they're first teething and their teeth are coming in and they're sore. Sometimes they nip, and that's at like 6 months. But I have never had a big, toddler, a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old bite my nipple. And if they did, that might be the end of our nursing relationship. I might have to be like, well, that wasn't cool. But I've never experienced that. So it doesn't, they don't nurse with their teeth. They nurse with their tongue and their lips, and they suck the nipple back into their throat. So the teeth aren't involved in the situation. So if that's something, if you're out there and you're listening and you're wondering, oh my gosh, what am I going to do when this baby has a mouthful of teeth? Like, it's not a problem.
Totally,
it's not an issue.
not an issue. I actually just well, first off, I want to say I heard this funny thing, or it was like, well, what about the teeth? And it was like, okay, Sheila, like, does Tom not have any teeth? Or any guy I've ever been with has had a mouthful of teeth, right? So I was like, oh, well, way to put it in that context. But you can also tell them the communication changes so much. You're not dealing with this blobbering little baby anymore when you have a 2 or 3-year-old. You can say, like, even now, Selah she'll like just be resting there. And I'm like, hey, your teeth. And she'll change her mouth, she'll move. So like, hey, your teeth are on me. It's just the resting. Or I'll say like, hey, stop for a second and then restart, because she's just gotten like lazy with her latch, because, sometimes that's like when she's sick and she's just laying around watching TV doing that. But yeah, the teeth thing is like, it changes when they get older, because you just have a conversation with them. And I actually reached out to my wonderful midwife and lactation specialist, and she sent me some facts or some things on breastfeeding, extended breastfeeding. And one of the things she said is, I'm actually just going to read what the quote was, but so if you just give me 1 second to do that, because she said it better than I'm going to say it about the teeth. Okay, she said that there's also research on the fact that by evolution standpoint, they call baby teeth milk teeth, because those are the ones that they still have while nursing once a child starts to lose their teeth and the adult teeth come in. That was the natural weaning age.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And that's usually 5 or 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So evolution-wise, yeah. And it's really important. It's really important for me to not miss this part of this conversation. The other day, I was having a conversation with someone who kind of gave me some pushback on still nursing. It's like, but don't you feel like she's done? Well, don't you feel like it's been long enough? I mean, come on, And I was like, okay, so let's break this situation down. I personally have no issue with nursing her, none whatsoever. And could really give 2 shits what anybody else thinks. But let's run through the scenario. Okay, so it's a Tuesday night. She's ready to go to sleep. And I say, you know what? We're not doing this anymore. Well, why? Just because I don't want to do this anymore. We're not doing this anymore. There's no part of me that wants to do that. So the pressure from the outside, where I felt like I had to defend myself, was like, that's why I'm going to stop right now, because my grandma thinks that I've been doing it too long, because other adults think that maybe it's a bit too much. And isn't it a little inconvenient? Well, isn't it a little weird? I don't really want to see that. Is it because the kids at the playground and soccer practice think that she's too old for that? That's the only reason I would stop right now. Not because I want to, because to me, it feels totally normal. She falls down, ninny. She doesn't feel good, ninny. Put her to sleep. I'm like, how am I going to get this child to sleep when she stops nursing? I don't know any different. No part of it feels like she's too old for this. Sometimes I laugh because she's tall and her legs are really long, and we're like trying to cuddle, and like I want to lay on my side and nurse, and her legs are all over the place, and I'll like laugh with her. I'm like, Jesus, where are these legs come from? How are we supposed to do this? Mm-hmm. But in my heart, there is no part of me that feels like this is extended or too long. And so that's what I'm going with. I'm not going with the societal pressure, be it a small amount. I felt like I've had to defend myself more in the past 6 months than I've ever had in my breastfeeding journey. So that's my thoughts on that. I'm not going to do this because someone else thinks that I should, which isn't really how I roll anyways with anything. So
yeah,
if you're feeling that way, listeners, just go into yourself and see what you really feel is best for you and for your child. And that's what you should stick with.
Yeah, because there are so many benefits for the child. I mean, this idea that like, oh, they're not getting anything, but on a emotional level, on a social level, on a health level, I mean, the breast milk is like liquid gold. I mean,
yeah.
Did you know that there are athletes that buy breast milk from women? There is a market. I looked into this. We had a running joke, me and my husband, for a long time. about me being like a professional cow.
Yeah.
But I hate pumping, so that's not happening. But yeah,
I tried
there's
pumping for the
a
first time, and it's
market.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does not feel good.
Mm-mm.
Pumping to me, like I understand there's some women out there that need to, and
Of course.
I do want to interject and say that we're not downing anybody that hasn't been able to breastfeed, because sometimes there are circumstances where things happen and it impedes your ability to. A lot of times the interventions that happen during birth, early babies, breast implants, there's all kinds of things. And not to down anybody that has to use formula or who, has a baby that has a really bad latch, some kind of anatomy problem in their mouth, and they have to pump and use bottles. It's not to down anybody like this. We're talking specifically to the folks that are interested and curious about breastfeeding over the quote unquote normal age of babyhood.
We're just here to support you. Right. We're just sharing this to support.
And to normalize it, to talk about it, because there aren't very many people out there like me and Shellbe who have had this extended period of breastfeeding to have this information to talk about it. And so to get this topic out there, because I don't really hardly hear anybody talking about it, and I have experienced some pushback from friends and family. I mean, my mom with every single kid at probably about 2, they're like, well, they don't need it anymore. They don't need it every single time. And it's like, okay, well, that's your opinion, but I've gotten a little pushback from people, comments, and things said. Well, don't you think they're old enough? And yeah, mind your own business is what I can say to that.
And the badass breastfeeding, I loved. They were so funny. So we're gonna plug them a lot in this episode. But I loved how she was like, "Listen, it's the cure. It's the cure all. Okay? They fall down, breastfeed. They are upset, breastfeed. Frustrated, breastfeed. You want to make a phone call, breastfeed. You want to have a conversation. I mean, literally. So myself, my sister, and our best friend are all nursing. We have 2, 3, 5-year-olds. We can have the most conversation when we're all sitting there nursing. It's like, hey, can you just put her on the boob so we can finish this thought? So I also wanted to talk about my best friend, who she has a almost 2.5-year-old, and she was saying to me the other day, I really feel like I'm done. Like I really need more sleep. I feel like my hormones are all out of whack. Like I've given this a really good, long chance, journey, experience, whatever word you want to use. And she kind of joked, or she's like, I guess you're not the one to talk to about weaning, huh? And I was like, no, I am. Because if you feel like you're done, that's okay. Your baby's 2.5 years old. Like and again, she's experiencing like hormone issues and lack of sleep, which she's been dealing with very well for the past 2.5 years. And I was like, I really support you doing this. Like you did it. And there's no part of me that's judging. So that's the other thing, as I said, what's the problem in this, I'll say in this country, I don't know globally how it is. But I'll just say for our country, in our society, it's like, oh, so if she weans at 2.5, she didn't breastfeed long enough, or did she breastfeed too long? Because right now she's feeling like she might not have done it long enough. Right. And then my sister has an almost 3.5-year-old. She's the same, where she feels like her relationship with her daughter would change if she wasn't just the milk monster, and that her daughter didn't come to her for that so often. They have their own journey with that, but I understand exactly what she's saying. And again, the sleep, So who's doing it too long and who's doing it not enough? Like that is so fucked up that's where we're at in our motherhood journey, where it's like, I'm over here and I've done it for too long. You're 2.5. That wasn't long enough. But then you have the mom of the 15-month-old that's back to work since the baby was 6 weeks old, and she's pumping her ass off, and she's exhausted, and she's tired, and it hurts, and her nipples are bleeding, and she doesn't want to do it anymore, but she feels like she has to because she's not doing it long enough. It's just like, oh my God, like it's just so all over the place. So this is just to
for those
normalize
mamas.
it.
Yeah, and for those mamas that have, that struggle with it. So my best friend Cassandra, who we went to high school with, just to plug again, we went to
Yeah.
high school together. We lost touch, and now we're reconnected through podcasting, which is just such a fun story. But
Yeah.
so Cassandra, she struggled because of C-sections, I believe, and she tried so hard and did everything, the pumping and the little tubes, and it was just so much work for her. But it was so important for her to have that connection and the nutrients, and she tried so hard and worked so hard. And I've had some doula clients, same thing, where they've just struggled, and the amount of unseen work that goes
Yeah.
into this, and it's not just the amount of work that your body is, so it takes a lot of calories. It takes a lot of your energy to make the milk. But the work that these mamas are doing behind the scenes, it's just, I would like to applaud those moms. And this is not to say that like, oh, well, you only made it to 6 months. You didn't do good enough. No, not at all. You did the best that you could. And congratulations, kudos to you for putting that much effort into it because you love your kids so much and want them to be the healthiest they
Yeah.
can.
Absolutely. And I think the first 6 months is probably the hardest of the breastfeeding journey, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for some,
Yep.
like that is where you're figuring everything out and your body's still going through all these changes. And I hand it a lot to the moms that are, like I said, going back to work and pumping. That takes a lot. I mean, pumping hurts. Oh, God.
Oh,
Forget
yeah.
teeth, forget toddler teeth. That pump is awful. So yeah, that's beautifully said, Nicole, because that's wherever you are in your breastfeeding journey. We just want you to know that you're supported and there's someone else out there. And if you're feeling down about it, get some support. Oh, in the C-section, we have touched on this quite a bit on our podcast on Fearless Motherhood, but how making the decision, if you're pregnant or you're going to get pregnant, making the decision to have an elective C-section, think about that part of it too, because I don't think that we're taught that enough, that if you have a C-section, your milk might not come in at the same time. It's messing up the whole process. So I think C-sections, really put a lot of thought into that, because that's another part of it afterwards. Now, not only are you trying to breastfeed and get that moving along, but you're also have this awful wound going on. So now you are having trouble with holding the baby and carrying the baby around. Like, just take that into consideration, because I think the C-section might be thought about a lot, just the pregnancy and then the C-section, and then it's like, oh, after that the baby's out. Yeah, but you need milk.
Yeah,
And
because
there's a
there's
whole
that whole
process.
hormonal cascade. And we talked about this a lot when we did our episode on Fearless Motherhood about postpartum. But there's this
Yes, that's what
whole
it was.
cascade of hormones that happens during labor. And when you interrupt that by having a surgical birth, the trigger for the milk coming in does not happen. And so you're setting yourself up for a much harder time. And there are definitely things you can do. I don't think we'll go into it on this episode. That'll be for a different episode. But there are definitely things you can do to relactate or to lactate. That's a thing. I mean, I have heard that as a grandmother, that there are cases where women have had to adopt their grandbabies and they hadn't breastfed for 25 years and were able to relactate. So if you've ever
Wow.
produced milk, yeah, it can come back, but they were able to relactate and breastfeed their grandchildren. So,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
the breast is amazing. I mean,
It
there's
is.
actually a mechanism where it sucks up the baby's saliva, and then your body reads what the baby needs nutritionally and produces the type of milk. So there's this feedback loop, produces the type of milk that the baby needs at that moment. So if your baby is sick, your body will recognize that by detecting it in the saliva and then produce the proper antibodies that your child needs. I shouldn't say baby, any age that your child needs.
Right.
Yeah.
Great point. And that's a good point to know, that you need to have that baby on the nipple as much as possible whenever they're not feeling good, because the bottle isn't going to have. So if you're pumping, the bottle isn't going to have. They're not going to get that same. We need that feedback loop. So I thought that was so cool. And I I have never had a breast pump because I have just exclusively nursed and that's been my journey. But recently I saw on Facebook that someone was looking for breast milk for her 2-year-old, and she specifically asked for no shots, for the mom. Like, can I get some breast milk without the COVID shot in it? And I was like, yes, I can do that. Unfortunately, I have not been able to make that happen for her, but I was like, I feel like I just want to pump. Like, even when Sayla's done, like, can I just keep pumping and just keep making this stuff because it's gold? I mean, yeah, what if another.
You can store it in the freezer and use it for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, eye infections, like, so even
Yeah.
after you're weaned, or for adults. A friend of mine, she tells this funny story. That there was a guy over working on her house, a plumber or something, and he was talking about having a sty in his eye. And she's like, "Oh, I have some breast milk in my freezer."
Yeah.
And her husband's like, "Whoa."
And he didn't do it.
Calm down.
Oh. My friend,
No, so, I mean, but
my friend
is
Carrie
liquid
has.
gold?
It is. My friend Carrie has put that in her husband's eye before because they had a case of pink eye going around and it cleared it right up.
Well,
Yes,
her
I don't
husband
know.
would do it in his eye, but the random stranger in the
Yeah.
house, he was like, "You're taking it too far, lady."
She's like, too far, too far. Okay. I just noticed that I'm in my mom's hypnotherapy room right now recording, and I just noticed this picture behind. I thought it was very fitting for this, and since this might be on video, I want to show you this. This is a great picture of my sister, mom, and I after my sister had her little baby here. Look at the girls with their hands up. I just thought that was I'm like, this is a pretty good picture to have in the background of this podcast here, Let's all salute to that. So.
Yeah. Well, we're at an hour. Oh my gosh, how time flies. So
I know.
I'm feeling like it's probably about time to come to our closing. So before we do, though, I want to see if there's anything else you want to touch on, and then I want to ask you, since this is the Ecstatic Life podcast,
Yes,
to answer the question: how does extended breastfeeding make your life more ecstatic?
Oh, wow. Okay, I just suddenly felt emotions run to my face. Because it's such a beautiful experience between my daughter and I. I just love that I can nurture her in that way. And I love how secure it makes her feel and how safe it makes her feel. And nutrition, obviously. And I feel like in my 40s, I'm 43 now, I'm just feeling more empowered and more badass, which I think goes with my ecstatic habits that I've learned from you, Nicole. And it just makes me feel empowered, It makes me feel like, wow, I can still do this. I was getting community acupuncture. The girl next to me was talking about breastfeeding, and I saw that she had an older child with her. I said, "Oh, are you still breastfeeding her?" She said, No, I have a 2-year-old. I said, "Oh, because I'm nursing my 4-year-old at the time." And she said, "Oh my gosh, that's so amazing that your body has produced milk for that long." And that was just overwhelming. And I thought, my God, I hadn't thought about that. So it makes me very thankful for my body and for my health. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think
Absolutely.
just feeling powerful enough to continue doing something that just really feels right for her and I. So yeah, it makes pretty ecstatic. And then we have dance parties.
Back in my lactivist days, I had one of the stickers I had was I can feed other people with my body. What's your superpower?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes, definitely. I love that experience we have. And it has been a little bit tough too. Like, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and say like, "Oh, it's been wonderful." Like, I'm tired. I'm still tired. I still don't sleep longer than 4 hours. It's also like she wants to nurse in the morning. So she has to have her morning ninny on both sides for like 20 minutes. And it makes me feel trapped on the couch. I get frustrated. I tell her this. I have got to get up. Like, I'm full of caffeine. I need to eat. I've already been up for 2 hours. I'm ready to get up and go. So I do have experiences where this hasn't been just a walk in the park the whole time. There have been definite times where I'm like, okay, how long are we going to do this? I feel trapped. Also, I don't leave her. Well, I wouldn't want to do this anyways, but I never leave her overnight, because obviously how's she going to fall asleep? So there's been hurdles is what I'm trying to say.
Well, no, this brings me to a good closing point. You're nearing the end most likely, because even if you do go for another year or so, I mean that you're on the
other side.
decline. She's going to at some point, probably pretty soon since she's school age now, get to the point where she's not going to need it, she's not going to ask for it, she's not going to want it. And that is a natural progression. I mean, nobody nurses when they're 13, even though she says she's going to. Nobody nurses.
Exactly.
That is not a thing.
I cannot tell her that, though, because she will be heartbroken. Yeah. She's like, I am. She has no idea what 13 even is. Yeah.
And I am personally going through, my weaning experience with my youngest. And so it's very bittersweet for me because in one way, I have been nursing continuously for 11 freaking years. And I am kind of done on my side, but he is just about to turn 2 in less than a month. And in exactly a month, on the 3rd of February. So he's about to turn 2, and I don't think he's ready. I know he's not ready, but I have cut him down. We've cut out night nursing. We night weaned. We're down to just at like nap time and bedtime. And if something happens, he gets hurt or something, but I've severely limited him. And he asks for it all the time. Booby, booby. Is it booby time? Is it booby time? Is it booby time?
Oh.
And it hurts my heart. But at the same time, I have things I want to do. I just blogged about this recently. I want to do a big time cleanse. I have had, for the last 10 years, I've struggled with a candida issue. And I have done all kinds of things with my diet and supplements. But I feel like I need a very, very hardcore cleanse. And it's not recommended to do that when you're breastfeeding. And I can't do a long fast. I can't, there's things that I can't do. Certain plant medicines that I would maybe like to experiment with that I can't, So it's bittersweet. It's like, this will be my last baby, and part of me wants to extend it further and just keep going. And then part of me is just like, I am so ready to have my body back just to me. So it's a struggle. I mean, you can't put limitations to, I mean, I think that's where I start, where it's like, okay, you don't have access anytime you want. We nurse at this time, we nurse at that time. We don't nurse at night. So maybe you guys are ready for that. Maybe it's like, okay, at nighttime we don't do it anymore. And then she figures out a way to sleep without it, but more gradual than just, I'm done.
Right, of course. And I don't even feel that. It's just so normal to me now. That's how I sleep. We found ways to sleep with. I mean, she doesn't always do it all night long. Most of the time she slept, she sleeps until like 5 or something like that. I don't really feel the need to do that, because if I did, I definitely would. I want to make sure that. And I really think she's my only one.
Yeah, I did. I was not getting good sleep. He was waking up. Yeah, it was about 5, and then just screaming at me. And so I was like, you know what, buddy? We have to cut this middle of the night nurse out, because it was like he wouldn't sleep after that without the boob in his mouth. And I like to get up at about 6:30 and do my yoga and my own thing. And if I moved, he would wig out, screaming at the top of his lungs, wake everybody else in the house up. And I'm like, yes, this is not working, buddy. So it took a couple of weeks, but now he's sleeping until like 7:30. So that's good, because But was there anything else that you would like to tell my listeners out there? Anything you would like to leave on that we haven't touched on? Any messages for moms who are going through it, or are curious, or are having doubts?
No, I think we touched on everything. This has been a great conversation. I really just don't hesitate to reach out. You know, Nicole and I both are on social media and we are available for conversations. We are very into all of these conversations, is pretty much what we're doing with our lives aside from raising children, spreading this awareness. So you can find me at Fearless Motherhood Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And actually, you can directly email fearlessmotherhood@gmail.com if you'd like to reach out. And of course, go listen to Nicole's episodes on my podcast. She has been on twice, and I know you are going to be a guest. We probably should just have you on every month because we have really good conversations. So I love
I'm down.
it. I love it. Yeah. So that was the Ecstatic Life. And then we also talked about postpartum, which was so good. So good.
Yes. Feminine reclamation. That was
Yes.
the first one. Feminine
Yes.
reclamation.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
What did I say? I'm sorry.
Ecstatic Life.
Yes. And then the other thing I just wanted to say, on Wednesday nights at 7:00 Eastern Standard Time, I have a Zoom chat that I do, and I just call it like round table chats with essentially Shellbe, and we talk about all things holistic. So with a strong focus on essential oils, because that's my jam. That's what I use. I'd say 80% of the quote unquote medicine in my home comes from essential oils. The rest is homeopathy and herbs. So if you'd like to come talk about that, it's a really fun space. And if anyone has something that they would like to share that they use, that's what I want it to be, a roundtable discussion of everything holistic. So you can email me or contact Nicole anyway, Facebook, Instagram, all the things. And I'll send you a link to register for that. And if anyone would like to just know someone else that is nursing at 5, I'm here because I have literally been searching to find a friend that wants to like homeschool our kindergartners while nursing together. So
Nice.
yeah. So thank you, Nicole. I'm honored to be on your podcast. This has been really fun.
I am so glad to have you. This was awesome. This was great. I'm so glad that we could get this information out there. And hopefully there's a listener who is also doing extended breastfeeding as you are, and I will reach out because to have a buddy. I mean, that's important. Hopefully this empowers some other mamas to continue their breastfeeding journey, to breastfeed in public without shame.
Please.
And to and to stand up, become a lactivist like us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Shellbe. And thank you, listeners. This has been awesome. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.